Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have had many guests in the almost 5 years we've been doing radio shows. And I got to tell you, among my very favorite is our guest today. For some reason, I feel that he's like of the people. And we try to do some things that are different. And a lot of times we bring in opposing sides, and then you can make up your mind. See, I personally treat every incident, every event as it's always a law case, because a lot of times you don't know who to believe or why do you believe it, especially dealing with the media today.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to bring in a guy who I thought my previous experiences of the people. So, Anthony, good to have you back again. Always,
Thanks for having me.
always, always a pleasure. I got some tough questions for you today.
All right. All right.
And,
I love coming on your show, Judge.
and
Whenever I get the call, it's always with pleasure that I answer. Yes, I will. I'll come on with the great Judge Dodell. And
depends on whose opinion you're listening to.
yeah,
So,
no, I love it. Voices opened, an open forum, freedom of speech. It's what it's all about.
that's why we're doing this today. If you really want to know, because I was interviewed yesterday and asked some very difficult questions, and I said to myself, it's time for me to take a position on something instead of just turning it over to two people who are going to spin the facts the way they want to spin it.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, because I know you're going to be candid, number one, and number two, you're really truly of the people, which I really do believe that, and three, you're smart. So
Thank
I
you, sir.
think, and you have always appeared to me personally to be somewhat neutral, fair, candid, not being pushed into some corner to
Right,
say
right.
something that you don't want to say. So today's questions are basically going to be soliciting your opinion as a lay person of representing basically us in America today. And you're not hired as an expert or anything like that. You're just a
Right.
guy. So, Guy, first question: New York City mayoral race. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think New York is looking at having Zoran Mamdani as their mayor. I don't think anything is going to change this. The who's, what's, where's, and why's of it can be debated, but this guy is going to be New York City's mayor. And a lot of talk about Curtis Sliwa dropping out to get the vote up for Andrew Cuomo. But truth be told, I don't see Sliwa voters going to Cuomo, even if Sliwa drops out. They're talking like you could take every number from Sliwa, add that to Cuomo, and maybe we'll have more of a chance. But I don't even think you're going to get the majority of Sliwa voters to vote for Cuomo. I think most of them, like a lot of New Yorkers, unfortunately, are going to sit on their ass and stay home on election eve. So, bottom line, my prediction on this one, you don't have to be Kreskin, as we used to say in the old days, but I see Zoran Mamdani as the mayor of New York City in November.
A racist, a bigot, basically a communist
Oh,
who's
yeah.
got all these ideas. I always use an expression that the average person is attracted to shiny objects. And so what happens is they're telling the public, and it is a blue city, it would always go Democratic with the exception of Giuliani and Bloomberg, and then back in the day, John Lindsay. But the
Right.
fact of the matter is, it's a blue city, and it's basically a democratic city, and has gotten to be, I think, more and more as more immigration has taken place. So I think
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. I think the guy's going to win, but
And
that's
and I believe it's really unfair and uncalled for people to ask the Republicans, the voters, and ask the Republican nominated candidate, Curtis Sliwa, to drop out of the race to what? Bail you guys out for what you created? I mean, we look at de Blasio and Adams were the two before Mamdani, who I just said is going to be mayor. You've just progressed into even worse a worse position than you're in as a New York citizen. And they just, not only are they hiding their face and voting for Mamdani, they are out there celebrating, proud of the fact they're voting an Islamic extremist, communist who believes in state-run businesses, this low-cost housing, just more slums. We saw what that did to New York City, the South Bronx back in the day. And this is his platform that he's actually running on and proud of.
Well, I kind of laugh at that too, because one of the assignments I had when I was on the bench was in something called landlord tenant or unlawful detainer
Oof.
cases. So I have a fair knowledge of the subject matter. A lot of times we talk about subjects I know nothing about, but this one I know about. And I can tell you, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I look at everything as though it was a legal case. And I was deciding based on evidence, because that's the only thing that really counts, relevance, bias, and all of that. And I can tell you the chances of his program for real estate is
Oof.
slim and none, and Slim has already left the building. So the reality really here is there's no way, in my mind anyway, that this is constitutional. And
Mhm.
you can't
Agree.
force a landlord or an owner of property, whatever kind it is. You can you cannot possibly force somebody to be a party to a contract. Now
No.
let's assume that you have a provision in there that when the lease expires. And I can't necessarily equate what he's got in mind versus California's rent control, because I
Mhm.
don't have enough facts to do that. But it sounds to me the landlords are not stupid. What they're going to ultimately do is they're going to redraft those lease agreements when they
Mhm.
lease expire, and they can't raise the rent according to Mandami, which is nonsense.
Right.
But the bottom line is they'll restructure it. So in other words, maintenance costs will go up,
Right.
maintenance services will go down because you got to save the money to pay the other. And the reality is it's going to drive a lot of the landlord business out of town, basically. And these people think that they're getting free bus rides. Well,
Free.
I'm going to tell you about a free bus ride. You know what it
Oh,
would cost the city to provide it as a free service? They could not possibly afford it. So the next question is, where do they get the money to provide for the free ride, right? For everybody, free ride for rich, poor, middle class, everybody.
yeah.
Where are they going to get it from? They're going to defund the police. They have no choice. There's the only place that they can really dig in are those kinds of discretionary costs. So my guess, and I guess I'm giving my opinion, my guess is that is not going to work, which leads to the next question I have for you is the Democratic Party, basically, at least their titular head in New York, the governor, have endorsed this guy.
Mhm.
He's the biggest disaster that could probably ever happen to the city of New York. And anybody that votes for him should make an appointment with their psychiatrist for the next day because they are out of their mind.
Yep.
And so it's nuts time. But then again, you can promise anything in an election. And if you look good and you hire the right kind of social media,
Which he did.
you make a splash. Well, he's probably a pretty good politician. I don't
Yep.
like the man. I really don't like the man for what he stands for. And if he had his way, he'd arrest Netanyahu for coming to New York, which is
Yeah.
absurd, That could never, never, never in this planet ever happen. But the fact of the matter is, he's promising people what they want to hear.
Yep.
And so the real question for you now is, where does this put the Democratic Party?
Well, it puts him into that even more than they have been, extremist column. You know, a lot of people that have left the Democratic Party say, I did this because this is not the party I remember. It doesn't resemble the party that I signed up to. And all they're doing every time they come across some kind of a speed bump or a policy that they don't agree with or what have you, there's no talking. It is, they go instantly to this extremist rhetoric, which of course we've seen in the past conjures up violence in a lot of people. There's no discussing things. They seem to have really lost their minds. And I know that kind of sounds like hyperbole, but you look at them and speak to them. I mean, why would Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, endorse Zoran Mamdani? What does it do for her? Uh, she could have just kept quiet. I mean, the guy was leading anyway. It's not like her endorsement is going to help. So it's just they believe coming off as more extremist is better for them at this point because it's in that bubble that they are in. They see support, like this unbelievable, passionate support for these extremist policies, but they don't understand that support base is a very small amount of really mentally ill people. But they see it as their base. So they want to anchor themselves to that. They really do need a candidate, especially if they want any chance in 2028, that comes off as a true moderate Democrat and really steers away and actually disavows a lot of these extremist Democrats that are out there now.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an issue-oriented person.
Sure.
But it seems to me that people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Crockett and others, they're killing the Democratic Party. They're awful for the country. Socialism has never worked ever any place in the world. Nope. Marx was wrong. The Russians proved that everything that they tried didn't work. Do you think it's going to work here any better than it worked anywhere else? Definitely not. And so the question really is, the Democrats, are they or are they not going to endorse this Mondami? So far, they've been hiding in the bushes.
Yeah, they're going to endorse him. They're going to work with him. And, as I see it, New York is in for one hell of a ride with this guy at the helm. I'm not exactly sure what powers the mayor has in some of these areas that he's talking about. I don't think he can enact eminent domain to take away people's real estate, but he can do other things like you pointed out to make it impossible for landlords to continue doing business. And once they pull out or once they do sell to the city with money that he says he's going to raise from the wealthiest New Yorkers and corporations, he's boosting up the corporate tax from 7 and change to 11 and change percent, which, if that doesn't drive businesses out of New York, I don't know. And as far as the wealthy goes, those are people that make $1 million in New York City. Now, I'm not playing down how awesome getting $1 million a year is, but in New York City, especially at this time, it doesn't qualify as being unbelievably wealthy, where you could start handing out money to the government for these liberal programs and buying real estate to set up low-cost housing. So, I think everyone will be affected by this mayor, and it ain't going to be good.
Oh, no, it's going to be a disaster for New York. But the fact of the matter is, I thought about eminent domain. There are requirements. You just can't go in and steal the property. It has to be for public use. And I don't know whether that would ever pass constitutional muster in terms of the definition of necessity, among other things. But I thought the other day, I'm not the only one who thought this, by the way, because I ran this through some other friends of mine, and they kind of thought the same way. And that is, this may be one of the biggest blessings for the Republican Party, because they got a guy that's going to fall on his nose. He's going to look bad doing it. He's going to alienate groups of people. The Republicans are kind of quietly sitting in the back saying, good luck. We don't care. We would have lost the mayorship anyway. It's a Democratic blue city anyway. Let's go back and not throw any money behind Sliwa or otherwise. I had a good book, by the way. I had Sliwa booked as a guest on the show.
Mm.
I was supposed to do it last week, but as the days go by, as that song goes, as time goes by, you can tell I was never a singer either. But the reality is, the Republicans almost want the guy to win. They
Well,
want him. They want him to fall on his nose because his programs are what he's talking about. I read them briefly. It not only is it communistic or socialistic, giving it the kindest term, they're now calling him a Democrat socialist.
yeah, yeah.
He's about as democratic as the moon.
They
And
the two terms don't ever fit together. A great point you bring up though, because even Donald Trump this evening was asked about the New York election and whether Curtis should drop out to give Cuomo more of a chance, and he would not answer that question. And I think that is like, look, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say Curtis should drop out because I don't think they want Curtis to drop out. I
no,
think they want this to
to
go
lose.
down and
Want to
show how
lose.
bad this can get. We,
Oh, yeah.
we it's really kind of it's called accelerationism. You ever heard of an accelerationist? They know that it's inevitable, so they want it to happen as quickly as possible to start the rebuilding phase. And I think that's what we're seeing in New York.
Well, everything's going to be in retrospect. We look at the situation 2 years from now. We may be wrong. Not likely.
Who
Not,
knows?
not,
But
not like no.
not likely.
I've been doing this for a long time. I can I can see where this is going. Most of what he's going to try to do is going to be in the court system for the 4 years he'll be in office.
Right.
And you do have a representative government. There is a city council and others that require consent. I'm not so sure he can pack that with his own kind of people. He's going to try. I mean, you're going to see uh, some Mohammeds getting all the jobs. That's where
Oh yeah.
that's where this is going. You're going
His
to talk.
his
Well,
administration is going to be worse than he is.
I'm not so sure it really is anything worse because he comes across that he's not so worse.
Right.
The problem is, as I said about the shiny object, he comes across well.
Yep.
John F. Kennedy won. He looked good. The various
Yeah.
people came along. They sold good, and that's one of the reasons why Kamala Harris was defeated. She didn't look good. She could
Nope.
smile and say all the things that they told her to say because they picked her in the back room, just like we were talking about a minute ago. And they're making these decisions. And personally, I think they're not so great in terms of decision making. You had
Right.
Nancy Pelosi, and I use this as an example all the time. The, Washington is totally corrupt. If you have any other thoughts in your mind, see the same psychiatrist that voted for Mondami. The reality is she was making $225,000 a year, and her net worth is 130 million. How did that happen? Well,
You,
gee, I just happen to be a great prognosticator and know which stocks are going to go up and which are going to go down
yeah.
based on legislation. No, that was just a coincidence. Oh, it was all in my husband's name.
Right.
By the way, California is a community property state. And unless they structured it so that it all turns out to be separate property for him, it's her income. You could say
Right.
it's not. And I once decided a case. In fact, somebody asked me not too long ago if I ever made a mistake when I was on the bench. I had probably about 10,000 cases. And I said that there was one that I remember. And it was a woman who was an executive at a big company. And she had a credit card. The husband was a ne'er-do-well gambler type. He ran up a big bill, and the bank came after him. And they also added her because she had assets, and she had a bank
Mm.
account, and he managed, over the appeared before me, managed to get a lien on that bank account. And
Ooh.
she was there with her lawyer representing that it was separate property. His debt was a separate debt. And those cases, lots of case law on it, whatever.
Mm.
She was a very nice woman. She had nothing to do with the credit card. She didn't spend a dime. She got no benefits and whatever. And I said to myself, community property, separate property discretionary call, I went her way, by the way.
Wow.
And if I looked at it and analyzed it again, being somewhat more skeptical, I probably was wrong.
Mm,
But I can't think of any others. Sure, there were,
interesting
but
case.
but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but that's how I learned about landlord tenant and stuff like that, and community property issues. And I can see this guy. This guy is laughable, truly laughable. Unless you are somewhat of a nut, this guy is a joke.
Yeah.
How anybody could vote for this guy is beyond any belief that I could ever have. But now it is what it is. And I was talking to my son who lives in New York, I asked him if people are going to move out.
Mm,
I said, I grew up out. I didn't grow up in New York City, so I'm a country guy. And I said, what do you think? He said, some people will. They're going to move to Scarsdale or Bronxville or
right.
someplace out on the island because this guy is a disaster.
No, he's
Whoa.
convinced. He's convinced that people aren't going to leave. As a matter of fact, I remember a quote of his or a sound clip of his. He was saying something to the effect of, the people that he has to raise taxes on are going to like paying more taxes because the city will be so much better with things like, the free buses, which the free buses, as I see it, these are going to be rolling homeless shelters during the winter months. It'll have a
Yeah.
heat. During the summer months, it has air conditioning without
Right.
without that barrier of a fare that has to be paid to get on. It's going to be like the subway platforms when they stopped arresting people for turnstile jumping. It's the only thing keeping the working people that actually use mass transportation to get from point A to point B from sitting next to a guy that's using the whole chair as a bed. He's got all of his merchandise. He's mentally ill, possibly dangerous. The fare is the only barrier, and he wants to take that away.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a very, very good point.
Terrible.
It makes a lot of sense. It kind of brings me to the same subject we were talking about earlier, which is the media. You don't hear about any of that.
No.
This is the first time I've heard anybody say anything like that, which makes sense to me.
You're right.
And the media, for whatever reason they have and continue to have, is they sugarcoat this guy. He's a bigot and a racist. And if he had his way, they would continue the intifada around the world. I mean, how can Ginsburg and Shapiro vote for a guy like this? But they are. They are.
They're doing it in so many cities around the world. We see what happened in London when they got a Islamic mayor over there. They kowtow to Islam, and before you know it, the morning prayer is being blasted 5 times a day in the neighborhood. Same thing happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They made a Somali enclave up there that isn't recognizable as America anymore. And if you say anything about it, you're Islamophobic, you're xenophobic, you're a terrible racist. And this is how they operate. Now, getting a foothold on the most powerful office, I would guess, in New York City anyway, it's a win. It's a win for radical Islam.
Yeah, and it's not even subtle.
No.
So I'm going to take you to the next subject matter, which is equally controversial, I'm sure. There is, at the current moment, a ceasefire of sorts in Gaza. I was asked yesterday, as a matter of fact, what I thought would happen in the future. Would it stick or not? Now I'm going to ask your opinion. You think this ceasefire is going to hold?
It's hard to tell because, I mean, what's left to negotiate? If you break the ceasefire, whether you're Israel or Hamas, because that's pretty much what it is, the Palestinians, what's left to negotiate? Gaza's gone. It's just rubble at this point. If this ceasefire goes to hell, Israel's just going to continue doing what they were doing, which is bombing the crap out of you into submission. So in that sense, I don't think there's a good reason for the ceasefire. Believe me, I don't believe there's any love there. I don't think this ceasefire came out of mutual admiration of the Palestinians and Israelis. So I think it'll hold. Where it goes from here, as far as, where are the Palestinians going? Are they going to be let back into Gaza to just restart what they were doing? Is it going to be occupied? Not so much occupied, but occupied by Israel. And then where do the Palestinians go? No one seems to want them. None of the bordering nations seem to want them. And, I don't see where it goes from here. I do think the ceasefire will hold, though, because especially the Palestinians have nothing as far as a bargaining chip goes here.
Well, now that they give up hostages, they don't have any leverage.
Right. Now they got nothing.
But if you look at it realistically, and I studied political science when I was in college, you look at it realistically, it's always about the money and power. Those are the two issues.
Of course.
The bottom line is this deal would not have happened but for Trump's acute, smart sense, business sense of making it financially profitable for the people that he needed to sign on.
Right.
Qatar and Turkey were two countries that supported Hamas along with Iran. Well, that money was coming. So if you press those two countries, and there's nothing to oppress in Iran, you press those two countries to cut off the finance and not provide any other assistance, and they somehow tame down the smuggling in of arms and whatever.
Right.
Hamas couldn't stand anywhere, no matter what. And I really did do a lot of research on the subject because I'm interested in it.
Sure.
Very interested in it. And I read the Hamas charter. People, especially the kids that were on college campuses walking around with signs, Free Palestine. I was saying, free Palestine from what? There was no Palestine until the middle of 1960. Did you know that? It was started by Yasser Arafat, who, by the way, died worth $2 billion. And I'm sure he was getting a big salary, too. But the fact of the matter is it's been corrupt from day one. And the whole PLO, of which Hamas was a part of, as well as the Muslim Brotherhood, there was no Palestinian people. They were basically clans like they are in Gaza. There was no Palestine. There was no Palestinian people. So in 1987, the Hamas charter came out, and I happen to have a copy right here. I was looking at it this morning. Do you know what the charter says about supposedly Palestine? Cannot be owned by anybody other than observant Muslims. It says it in writing. It says that the struggle is against the Jews and calls for the eventual creation of an Islamic Palestinian state in all the former mandatory Palestine and the obligation of dissolution of Israel. It basically says it has to be destroyed. And I can tell you, I did negotiating as part of my job, even as a mediator when I was doing stuff from the bench. When one side says it has an irreversible position and it's to destroy you, tell me where you start the negotiation. I mean, who are you going to negotiate with?
What do you think the Palestinians would accept at this point? I mean, obviously there is even though it's a ceasefire, there seems to have been a victor and a defeated here in this scenario. What do you think they would take for a lasting peace? Because from what you just read, it seems like, no, they need the complete destruction of Israel. I mean, that seems to be their policy. And Israel isn't going to just allow Hamas to set up camp right on their border again. So while we are looking at a ceasefire and some type of maybe hopefully a more permanent peace, do you see anything the Palestinians can be offered that wouldn't create a future conflict anyway?
Well, this wouldn't be the first offer. If you look at history, again, factual. It's not even arguable. They were offered parts of the West Bank, etc., for years and years. And as Abba Eban, the former foreign minister of Israel, said one time, is the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And the reality is, it's been offered many, many times, even as part of the Oslo Accords. And it rejected everything because it's all or nothing. In fact, it says a two-state solution was deemed unacceptable to Hamas. And it also says that the Jews, by name, should be hunted and personally killed, and that there's no way that anybody can have anything to do with this land that they claim is occupied, but them. And that's kind of assumes occupation. In fact, most people don't know it, but the way the whole geographic was set up was after the United Nations had approved the mandate, a bunch of guys got together in London and drew a map. Before 1948, there was no such country as Jordan. There's no such country as Saudi Arabia. This was all created by a bunch of people sitting in a room with a map. And the reality is, when you go to war and you lose, you lose. I mean, you can't go to Yugoslavia these days because there's no Yugoslavia.
Right.
And it's a great side story. I'll tell you some other time. But the places, the Ottoman Empire was once a very powerful, the most powerful entity anywhere. Tell me who's in there now? Nobody.
So it sounds like there's no real long-term solution here besides.
No, there is the solution. You know what it's called? Money. Don't you think the deal has been made? You think all of a sudden Kushner shows up? The guy hasn't been around for 4 years, probably 6 years. All of a sudden he's back. Why? He's got influence. And he's got the bucks. And he's talking for the father-in-law. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's a smart guy. And how do you think the Abraham Accords got negotiated? Kushner, and now he's got help with this guy Witkoff. But he's the guy behind the scenes going to make it happen. They'll make a deal, whether it's trade or you build here and I'll build there or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to cut you off, or we're going to add to what we're giving you every month. It's all about the moolah. I don't mean the moolah. I don't mean the mullahs.
Right, the mullahs.
It's
No, I understand that.
It's all about the dough. At the end of the day, that's what's going to dictate the outcome of all this. Why do you think the Soviet Union was dissolved? Couldn't survive economically.
Couldn't support itself anymore. Yep.
And as a historian, people said to me, "It can't happen here. What happened in like the Holocaust?" I have always said, "Don't be so sure." And the reality is, if you look what the Weimar Republic was like, which was the period between the First World War and the Second World War, you have a parallel. You have an absolute parallel. And what helps promote it is the biased nature of the social media and the cable providers. I don't know what you call them.
Well, there's a lot of propaganda going on these days in this country. People don't seem to realize it. There's still people lost thinking that the news is the actual news. What I see a lot of are boomers. The boomer is the big enemy now these days, but they are pretty ignorant as far as what's going on in real life out there. They're watching news programs. They still believe it's Walter Cronkite speaking to them. And there is no way possible that the news can't be true, truthful. They think it's all the truth. So they really have a misconception of what's going on. They're very susceptible to propaganda, and young people too. If you tell them what they want to hear and tell them they're special and great and this guy's evil, they'll believe that that guy's evil and they're great. And some of them get so revved up to the point that they try taking pot shots at people. So the propaganda is rampant in this country to levels that I think even overtake what was going on in the Soviet Union with Pravda and their propaganda machine over there. There's a lot more platforms now to spread propaganda on. It's not so much the government media anymore. It's the government influencing people that have influence on social media.
We're going to have as a guest maybe next week David Schoen, who's been a guest on mine before. He was President Trump's lawyer in the impeachment proceedings, constitutional lawyer, very, very bright, honorable guy, really professional.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions really is for all of us to think about, and there's going to be a wide variety of differences of opinion, and that is the question of censorship. And people go out and say whatever they want to say and do all of that, which is the progressive view, and versus some form of government control to prevent what's going on right now with the indoctrination of our kids with some of this very, very vile, basically propaganda or sales pitches that are being made to them and causing a lot of what we're seeing happening right now. But that's going to be the constitutional question because it deals with whether or not we have a democracy or we have something less than that. And people always quote the statement from some opinion, the Supreme Court opinion, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not the law, by the way.
Right, right.
Hasn't
Yeah,
been the
everyone
law.
has that misconception that that's the law.
Hasn't been the law for about 40 years.
Yeah,
And I always
yeah.
tell people they should read the Brandenburg case, Brandenburg versus Ohio, and you can see the difference between free speech, censorship, and whatever.
Yeah.
And then you got the power of the Communications Act, which basically provides immunity to all of these providers.
Right.
You can't sue them for publishing anything. That needs to be changed in my as a lawyer.
Interesting.
In my opinion, and that's what we're going to talk about: constitutionality and how it is affected by the various political and
So could I give you a hypothetical then?
Sure.
We'll look at something like Twitter, X, and if there are certain regulations put in place and laws that that people can be sued, could somebody be sued for defamation for saying something? Someone posts something about someone that's completely false, and they have 3 followers. They're nobody. They're a kid, let's say 18, 19 years old, no knowledge of the law or what have you, and the person that they were talking about says you defamed me in some way and wants to litigate that. Do you agree with a scenario like that?
Well, first of all, let me answer it this way. I spent 5 years presiding in a court called Restraining Order Court. In fact, I wrote an article which told is the authoritative article in California on restraining orders. People have always said, can you stop people by getting a restraining order?
Right.
And the answer is, I did issue some because I found that the speech was inciting people to violence or potential violence, and it qualified, and I saw no reason why, and nobody ever appealed me from doing it, although one guy did appeal me to the California Court of Appeals, and the court affirmed my decision and said that I was right. Not always right, but I was right that time. And the reality is that people are going to do and say what they want to say. You can sue somebody in small claims court, by the way. And I put that as a chapter, part of a chapter I wrote in my book. By the way, I'll pander the book for the moment. It's called From the Trench, which is the actual practice of law, to the bench. And some very, very interesting cases that I put in there as illustrations of what can happen since you don't know anything about the legal system. Now you do. Now you do. So the answer to your question, long form, and I sometimes tend to talk a little too much.
All good.
Although the long form is you can sue for defamation. You could also sue for invasion of privacy. Problem has been in the past is you couldn't identify the sender because they all used anonymous names.
Right.
There may be some way that they can tighten the legislation to require proof of that's who you are. So there's a place where you could go to collect against them. And there's a general rule in defamation cases, by the way, so the audience has a sense. You have to prove what's called special damages.
Right.
How have you been damaged? But that goes away and it's eliminated in certain instances. So you don't have to prove special damages. The fact that it happened itself, which we call the actus reus, the fact that it happened on its own, even without an intentional element, is actionable. And I didn't have many that I can recall cases where there was a defamation issue
Mm-hmm.
in any of the courts that I presided over. But I can see that it can be done, and that's
Yeah.
frankly, looking at it practically, that's the way you may be able to control some things. People
But
don't want to
here's
get hit, don't want to get hit with judgments and have their bank
true.
account grabbed.
But here's
Uh,
another interesting take here. I know that defamation is much harder. The burden is much more difficult on a public figure. If the person is a public figure, it's much harder to prove defamation and damages and whatnot.
yeah, it's called
But
Sullivan versus New York Times,
okay, so
Supreme Court case.
the very kind of, if you're on social media, you're a name, you're an influencer on social media these days. If you're on social media, doesn't that make you a public figure? Most
Yeah.
people are trying to get as many views and as many responses. They want their opinion heard. They're putting their name and picture out there, let's say. Doesn't that qualify as a public figure at this point?
No, not according to the case law as it exists today. That
Ah,
does not mean that the law is not evolving. The law does evolve. In fact, changes day to day. What was the law before may not be the law again. In fact, I can speak to that because I took a case to the Supreme Court and got a unanimous verdict to change the law in California. It had been what it was for 100 years,
hmm.
and we had the right facts. It wasn't that we were geniuses, we just had the right circumstances. We got the California Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court. And the opinion, by the way, if anybody's interested, is in the appendix to my book, From the Trench to the Bench, Navigating the Legal System and Finding a Spiritual Path Along the Way. That's anyway, the bottom line is today's law may not be the law tomorrow. In fact, you saw it happen in real time with Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
Um, People don't really understand what that case is about, and it's not about what they think it's about.
No.
It just basically was a states' rights case,
Yeah.
basically saying turn it over to the states. It didn't change a lot of the things that were already in existence and were not even sought to be changed. It was just that main issue, and it
Well,
got reversed.
they didn't do a good job of explaining it on the news, that's for sure, because their
Well,
agenda was they wanted the people riled up like they were infringing on women's rights to have an abortion. Somehow they thought there was a right to have an abortion. I don't know where that came from, but they wanted to stir them up, and they did. I mean, that's what we saw.
but it's a companion issue actually to what's called mandates. Some people say the government has the right to tell you wear a mask, whatever it is that they're going to do,
Mhm.
versus your right to decide for yourself, which it's comparable in a way to the question of abortion.
Right.
You have the right to do it yourself, or can the government tell you can't do it? I mean, the government tells you can't pass a red light. That's okay, but how far does that governmental power go? That's really undefined and is
Mm.
evolving, even with regard to search and seizure issues. When I first was out of the district attorney's office, where I was a prosecutor, uh, the laws were very, very different in terms of search and seizure. And the Fourth Amendment and Sixth Amendment became very, very, very appropriate at the time. And so today's law may not be tomorrow's. I mentioned
Mhm.
that a minute ago, but the fact is it could have a profound effect everywhere you go. As the Supreme Court becomes more conservative and tends to be more states' rights
Right.
oriented, that's where you're going to see less government control. And the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is the Democrats just want to keep spending money, and the
Yeah.
Republicans don't. I mean, they want to give somebody a fish versus teach them how to fish.
Right,
And
right.
that's the difference
And
between the two.
Dallas.
And it depends on who's going to be in power. We know for the next 3 years, any Supreme Court nominations are not going to be your liberal from any kind of urban area. I can guarantee you that.
We've
So,
also we've also seen over the course of the years that the law has had trouble keeping up with technology. A lot of things that would be able to be carried over to more of a digital platform legally aren't. Brand new laws have to be made. Just because something's on paper, it has to adhere to certain laws. And then if it's digital, which is pretty much the same, but it's a different platform, there are different laws, or laws haven't been written for it yet. So that's always been a problem, I think, with the law keeping up with technology. And as far as making people liable for what they're posting on digital media, on YouTube videos and whatnot, I think it's just as much a tough First Amendment issue as it was when we looked back at magazines and newspapers being held liable or not, or having laws to protect them. So I don't know where it's going to end up, but again, I think there's a huge delay in the law catching up with tech.
well, there's two interesting issues that are side issues. One is AI.
Oh,
We're entering a
crazy,
whole new
crazy.
world with no legislation at the moment.
Yep,
Although it depends on your interpretation of what people are doing, whether or not it's constitutionally permissible or not, and we don't know where that's going to ultimately go.
yeah,
But the argument is, of course, there's a real plus for AI, and I can tell you that's true. Also, there's a high risk on the other end, and so the
yep,
question is going to be how much control is the government going to take, if any, because remember who's contributing the big bucks.
right,
Those guys are not interested in any uh, restrictive legislation. In fact, they want less regulation, less and less and less.
exactly.
And that's obvious from what you see, even what you're being told. And by the way, I just want to do two quick quotes from the Hamas charter. Article 13 says there is no negotiated settlement possible. Jihad is the only answer. That's in there. That's in writing, by the way. Article 13. Article 16, Article 22 makes sweeping claims about Jewish influence and power, claims the Jews were responsible for multiple revolutions, including the French Revolution, World War I, and the Russian Revolution. And it claims the Jews control the United Nations, is supported by imperialistic forces in the capital West and communist East, and they promote the book Protocols of the Elders of Zion. So you tell me that doesn't express an almost irrevocable position that makes negotiations impossible. And
Yeah, that's
that's the point I want to make. I wasn't going to do any of this, by the way, until yesterday. I wasn't going to. I don't give opinions generally, except when I was in court. But this show is not about me. It's about what other people think and
right.
what they say, and to teach people so they understand what's going on around them in a fair and honest way. But yesterday, after that question was asked of me, I said to myself, you know what? You need to be vocal about how you feel, as long as it's righteous and it's supported by not only the
Sure.
facts but the evidence. And I don't take positions that are wild. I'm not considered real conservative. I'm certainly not considered real liberal. The reality is, you say it like it is, and people will either believe you or they won't. If they
Right.
do, great. If they don't, that's great too. But at
And the
least it creates conversation. Look, there
the
are going to
yep.
be people who are going to disagree with me. I'm sure there's tons of those, but there's also people who are going to say, you know what, the guy makes a point. Let me think
That's
about
just
that.
it. The easiest thing to defend is an opinion or an idea that you have that you are very passionate about. It's so easy to voice your opinion and speak and debate about something you feel very passionate about. That's why these idiots that you see in this No King rally that we saw the other day, they don't know why they're there. literally don't know why they're there. They're asked, why do you see Donald Trump as a king? What rights has he taken away? How is he trouncing on the Constitution? And they stand there. They've decided to go out. They were either given or they made a little sign for themselves. And when they're questioned about why they're there, they have no idea. So you have to assume they're not very passionate about what they're saying. They're just out for a day. It was nice. It looked like a lot of the cities had sunny days. They went out on a Saturday afternoon. They're with like-minded people. No one's calling him an idiot. So I think that was much more important to them than putting across some kind of a political ideology.
The interesting thing is you'll notice there's no coverage right now of pro-Palestinian rallies on the school campuses.
Yeah, those went away.
Why is that? Why did they go away? Because they finally realized that the people that killed all those innocent people are getting humanitarian aid. I don't know of any incidents in history where we gave humanitarian aid to the Japanese after we bombed the hell out of the two big cities. I mean, the reality is this is all about the press and the coverage and what they're expecting to get out of it. And I want to talk about another subject, but we don't have time today. You'll come back, I hope.
Sure.
And I want to talk about ICE.
Oh,
the
okay.
enforcement of immigration policy, because they're two very different sides. That argument, and there's an argument that could be made for both sides, and it depends how you feel, because a lot of what goes on in the world is how you feel, and it's not necessarily related to evidentiary support, which is something that I want for myself. Well, not everybody does that. There are a lot of people in this country who have no clue. If you ask them who the vice president was, they have no clue who that is.
No clue.
I mean, if you ask them who Yogi Berra was, they don't know who Yogi Berra was either. I mean, so the bottom line is we're keeping on moving along, and the past has seemed to be further and further in the past and less recognizable. So I'm going to render an opinion when I have one. It's not about everything else.
Oh, believe me, as you probably guessed, I have an opinion on ICE, and I'll save it for the next time we're together.
Well, that's why I wanted you on the show today, because I know you're going to say what you think and what you feel, and it's going to be based on logic and reason as opposed to just an emotional response.
Right,
so we'll talk after after the election. And
gotcha.
Maybe at the swearing in of Mandami or something.
Yeah.
But the good news, we had this no kings thing yesterday. The good news is that Prince Andrew will never be the king.
That's true. Yep.
Done deal. And at some point in time, we can talk about the Epstein file also, and why nobody's seeing it. Interesting.
Absolutely.
There was a thing I think on 60 Minutes last night, or Sunday night, talking about the manuscript of this lady's book, Jufrey's book, doesn't have any names in it. Why not? Somebody made sure that those names weren't going to get named. And the bottom line is, someone said that that's not the final manuscript. That may be the final manuscript, but those drafts, before they got pressure on her, those drafts did include the various names, and they sure as hell do not want to make that public.
She wants to see the light of another day. She knew what not to do. Put names in that book.
Oh, she probably had them in there originally.
Originally,
But the publishers
of course. Yep.
Forced her to take them out. I mean, that's part of the way the system operates. And we'll talk about that the next time. As usual, it's a pleasure to have you as a guest. And I of course, I'm going to call you again.
Absolutely, Judge.
You give a great show. So
I love it. Love doing your show, Judge. Anytime, bro.
Okay. We'll talk to you again. Bye, Anthony.
Take care.